Hey, good morning, Lorenzo here, episode 20 already of KSP Next, ominously titled When It Rains. We need $1 million for the launchpad, and we have a rocket that ostensibly can take a man to the moon, which is a contract that pays $1 million. So if we can do that, we are home free. We just need to demonstrate it first, because the penalty is about $2 million. So we've got the Space Liner 2 right here, mission titled The Lunatic. That's Jebediah. He's off on his trip towards the moon. Now, I've discovered the Mech-Jeb ascent guidance, and I'm going to try and use that to get us into a nice and efficient orbit by following the marker on the nav ball. Something appears to be wrong with the rocket though. Look at the cone. It's not following the path as indicated by the engines. And yeah, abort the rocket. Yeah. Jebediah is flying away with about 5 Gs of escape force. The rocket engines have turned off. Let's check the radio feed. Jebediah is alright. The rocket is very much not. It seems he is out of the path of debris. Deploying the parachutes now. Let's have a look around. He will probably be alright. The only thing that could happen now is some debris striking the space center. But we were going at a fairly heavy angle, so there's probably a low risk of that. So the bad news, no $1 million. The good news, the abort system worked. It actually shut down the engine, jettisoned the fairings, and took Jebediah to safety. Let's actually have a look at that in some slow motion. Here we go. This is the ascent just prior to the incident, and we could see an explosion on the rocket, and I'm interested to see that happened before or after the abort. Now, the abort shut down the engine, so as soon as the engine stopped firing, I have pressed the abort key. So we have the fairing tumbling now. That explodes, if I remember. The engines are now off, pretty much at the same moment as the explosion, and I think that was really a lucky timing of the abort command, because if that second stage had exploded and the first stage was still going, there was about a 50-50 shot of it slamming into the capsule and maybe destroying Jebediah. Whereas now, the mission in the rocket is a total loss, obviously, but Jebediah is fine. Alright, plan B. We're gonna send a orbiter and impactor to the moon to raise the cash, to build the launch pad to make the bigger rockets for the future. This one now taking a more traditional ascent path, but we're still going to experiment with steeper turnovers. And we did that now. First stage is burning out at just about 80 kilometers, and that should be low enough to separate the fairings. Except that it's really not. Look, the second stage is made out of cryogenic tanks, and the drag, even at 90 kilometers, at like 5 kilometers per second, has overheated and destroyed the second stage. So even though the payload and the third stage are completely fine, look, they're just floating there next to the first stage, they don't have the delta V to accomplish the mission. That's a bit of a bummer. But what we can do, and what we often do with these partial failures, is we establish them as a communication satellite. The third stage did have enough delta V to put it into a low Earth orbit, which it's currently in. See the maneuver here, just disposing the spent stage back into the atmosphere, whereas the satellite can use its thrusters to remain in orbit. And we have just phoned back down to the planet and ordered the construction of several more Lunar Ranger rockets. Because we'll need them to raise the money to build the launch pad. We already have hydrogen liquid oxygen technology. We've already designed a rocket to take a man to the moon with that. We just need the bigger launch pad. So if we can accomplish this mission, we have the cash to do so. Now, before we continue with the Lunar Rangers, let's revisit our Red Ranger, who is now approaching Mars. That should also give us, the science from that should of course be huge, like hundreds and hundreds of science points, but it should also give us some money to maybe upgrade the launch pad. The maneuver node has been set to better intercept the planet to make the periapsis really low, and the flight computer is just about to execute that. The problem is the fuel is not properly settled in the tanks, and you can see the flight computer going crazy, engaging and disengaging the engine, and that's not working. Now, it tried to induce a rotation maneuver before that, so then the rocket gets to correct the rotation. Doing that accidentally settles the fuel, and then if the maneuver node is triggered at the right time, we waste some delta V turning around, but the engine at least is on. So the maneuver completes, and we are, well, give or take a few dozen meters per second, we're on our way to Mars. Look at that. We are approaching it. And the good news is we have enough delta V in our rocket to actually circularize around Mars so we can leave the payload there. The bad news is we don't have a satellite uplink connection to send the command to actually do so, and I didn't do it beforehand with the flight computer. So now as we gaze upon the red planet for the first time in this program, and just take a second to do that, it's made so well by the guys that made the Scatterer mod and the RVE and the RSS and all the mod people. Look at that planet, it's just amazing. And it's going to be better in real life. Anyway, I was, before being mesmerized by the planet, I was doing something else, explaining that I hadn't put the maneuver node in the flight computer. Yeah, trying some manual controls, even though that of course doesn't work. The flight computer still doesn't have a connection, and there's really nothing we can do about that. The solution would have been really easy. Either program the maneuver node beforehand with the flight computer. It can do that. We could have done that days ago. That could have worked out fine, and then we would have been able to circularize here and have a payload and then wait until the planets approach more closer together and then have an uplink. But, we didn't. So instead, we get to watch as we actually approach the planet quite close, to about 1,000 kilometers, and we can behold it in all its splendid glory. But we cannot return science, we cannot complete contracts, we cannot establish orbit, so we're going to leave it behind again, which is, I think, a failure. Nevertheless, we have made it to the red planet, so we can at least print some newspaper articles, but the visit was brief, it was unproductive, and it has whetted our appetite for more. There is a small silver lining. This spacecraft is still in an orbit that intersects the orbit of Mars. It still has a full fuel tank, it's got functioning solar panels, and it will re-enter Earth comm range. So we'll just put an alarm on the alarm clock, see if we can make something happen with it in the future. But for now, we wave goodbye to Mars with a little sour aftertaste as we return to the KSC with another Lunar Ranger, trying to establish lunar orbit and adding a crater there for those all-important funds to upgrade the launch pad to get everything off the ground. A night launch this time, again trying to be edgy with our ascent, again kind of overcooking it, but because it's dark and there isn't a person on this payload and we've gotten used to failure by now, we don't really care. Look at that, there's a city down there, the payload is not going there, so we can just explode it in the air and launch the next one. That's the sentiment of this year at the space program. Tranquility 2-E, same mission, same rocket, let's hope it doesn't explode this time. Here we go. By the way, these things cost about 20,000 credits, and we have a mission for lunar orbit and a mission for lunar impact, and they both pay about 150 grand. So we can afford a few failures, and we'll still make the $1 million mark for the new launch pad. Because before this episode, we were actually at like $1,001,001. Just need a little bit more to have a little cushion to keep building rockets. And while I explained that, you can see that this mission so far is going pretty well. The second stage has circularized. We are actually en route to the moon. Skipping through the mission real quick because we've seen it a million times already. Third stage has established lunar orbit by now and is returning some science from that, so that gives us the first objective achieved marker in this episode. Now the orbit it has established is current altitude 42,000 kilometers by 10 kilometers. So it's not quite on a impact trajectory yet. Well, maybe. Depends on the peak. If we're going to meet one, how high is it? Do we have some connection to steer away from it. And the reason I want to do this is get a feeling on if we could possibly land this satellite. Now, the first answer is, of course, hell no. You can't land a satellite. That's crazy talk. It doesn't have landing legs or, I don't know, landing stuff. But, we're going at about 2.3 kilometers per second over the surface now. We're really close to the surface, so we don't need a lot more than that to just land. And we have like 200 meters per second of delta V more in our rocket. So like on paper, we could land this thing. And well, because our mission is to crash, we can just go ahead and try that. I thought. Of course, there is a problem. We're really close to the lunar surface, and thus it is occluding our comlink to Earth. It's a common theme in this episode. We do have a orbiter overhead that could relay the signals, but the omni-range antennas, of the omnidirection antennas we have on this, don't have the range to actually talk to that satellite. So what I want to do is aim the long-range dish on the front, that's a targeted antenna, aim that toward the relay, and that way have communication with the satellite. Well, of course, I can't set that up whilst I don't have a connection with it. So now we have to just kind of hope that the 10-kilometer orbit is sufficient. It really doesn't look like it, but kind of have to hope that the 10-kilometer orbit is sufficient so we get another try at this and can try to land the satellite. Oh, I can see its shadow. It's it's at 10.7 kilometers now. It's agonizingly close to the ground. It really is just a matter of, is there going to be a peak at any point that's like 50 meters higher than the next one? We're nearing the periapsis. We're at 10.3 kilometers. Our vertical speed is, I think we're going to do it, guys. Oh my god, that's so close. We are now rising. We're past periapsis. So now if we can't see any big mountains in near the horizon in the immediate future of this probe, it's going to make it. And that was a really close approach. Well, seeing as the mission was a crash, we can get away with that. We can still bill that as a part of the mission. That's all good. Yeah. So while we wait for this to gain a little bit... Ooh, this is going to be a tight ridge. Is this rise? Ooh, this may even... Oh, there's a shadow again. This one may even have been closer than the other one. But now we're gaining altitude and there are no new peaks, so we should probably make it out. After this is episode 20, I'm going to do something new. I'm going to do not a recap, but like a state of the space program episode where I'll just be live playing, probably going around the space center, talking about the research choices I've made and want to make, and just the general sketch a plan for what I want to do in the next, like, say, 5 or 10 episodes. Maybe revisit some of the old probes we have out there, do some minor things with them. Episode will probably run 15 to 20 minutes, a little bit longer than these ones, but definitely not hours. Anyway, you'll see it appear in the list. So next orbit, couple days, because it's such a high orbit, and we are setting the antenna here to, aim at the relay. And the fact that it is in the right position is just a pure coincidence. I mean, we have a few assets around the moon, and they're in high orbits, so we have access to them. So same situation. I lowered the periapsis a little bit more even. We are now 9 kilometers. We're going to be 9 kilometers over the surface. Currently at 15, trying to brake, but as you can see, the engine has just broken. That means no landing, but we separated the third stage, ditched it, completed another orbit, and used the RCS system to, make our periapsis like properly subterranean. It's now at minus 17 kilometers, so yeah, I think we can spot the mountain that this thing is going to crash into. It's that one. We're not going to clear that top. We're sinking pretty fast. We're at just 11 kilometers and falling, and we're never going to get up again. Trying to return some last-minute science, that's obviously not going to work. 2.5 kilometers per second versus this mountain. Yeah, mountain wins, but we complete the contract and our objective, and that means we can upgrade the launch pad. Maybe we should have upgraded the dikes instead, but that's just a visual glitch. Thanks for watching this time. See you around for the next episode. don't forget to subscribe and like this video. And, well, see you next time. Goodbye.